It is!
So today we're going to be wrapping up our story on Laban. And hopefully you've learned as many lessons from this man as I have, because he's a character which we should look at and see how we shouldn't treat people. Why? Because he's an untrustworthy person, and he cared more about materialistic things than his own family. Now, we looked at a number of lessons this week, and before we get started this morning, let's do a quick review on what we've looked at. On Monday, we looked at occurrences in the Bible where we're first introduced to individuals and what was said about them in those verses. And how they were first described in those verses told us a great deal about their character. Laban was a man who loved his stuff, and that's what we're first told about him, that he loved his materialistic possessions. And we need to make sure that what's known about us is that we have a godly character and that we show that to other people. Then on Tuesday, we looked at decision making. And what is most important is to always go to God in prayer to guide our decisions. Never make quick decisions without going to God first in prayer and asking for His guidance. And we looked at Philippians 4, verse 6 and 7, that tells us no matter the situation that we're in, we need to approach God in prayer. And we don't read of Laban doing that in his life, where he consults God before making decisions. And yesterday we discussed covenants and how our word is our bond. When we say we're going to do something, we need to do it. And how when we make a vow to God, like through baptism, that's a vow that we cannot break. And Laban was a man who couldn't be trusted because he broke his vows. He went back on his word, and God doesn't look favorably on people who do that. So for our last devotion this week on Laban, I want to consider with you the idea of deception and how we need to be on the lookout for deception in our lives. So to begin, let's look at if Laban was a man of deception. Did he deceive others, or did he speak the truth? Well, we know from our story yesterday that he was a man who couldn't be trusted because he went back on his word. And he did that through deception. We read about how he deceived Jacob by giving him Leah instead of Rachel, and how he deceived him into working 7 more years for him. Let's refresh our memory. So let's go back to Genesis 29, and we'll read verse 25 together. So open your Bibles to Genesis 29 and read verse 25. It says, "And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and he said unto Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me?" Jacob is beguiled, it says, and that word means to betray or to deceive. And there's our word that we're going to be looking at today, deceive or deception. And Jacob should have been used to this type of behavior, because if we turn back to Genesis 27, we read of a time when Rebekah and Jacob deceived Isaac. So let's turn there. So Genesis 27, just a few pages back, and we're going to read the first 10 verses. It says, "And it came to pass that when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau his eldest son, and said unto him, My son. And he said unto him, Behold, here am I. And he said, Behold now, I am old, I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field, and take me some venison, and make me savory meat, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die. And Rebekah heard when Isaac spake to Esau his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt for venison and to bring it. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison, and make me savory meat, that I may eat and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, and fetch me from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death." So we all know the story of her telling Jacob to put on clothing that would make him feel and smell like Esau so they could trick Isaac and get his blessing. So this type of behavior is something that seems to run in the family, deceiving others to get the result you want. And Rebekah and Jacob pay a big price for this deception. We are told that they're ever able to see each other again because of that mistake, because they deceive Isaac. Jacob, he needs to flee and to leave his whole life behind. Everything that he knew, he had to leave behind because of their deception in this chapter. And Laban tricking Jacob would be something that Jacob would be all too familiar with, because he did the same thing to his own brother and father. Unfortunately, this type of behavior from Laban was not out of the ordinary. Laban was a man who couldn't be trusted. And to think he does all of this to his own family. So let's turn over to Genesis 31 and read about more deception of Laban towards Jacob. So Genesis 31, and we're going to read verse 7. And this is Jacob speaking unto Rachel and Leah. Verse 7. And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. So Jacob was used to this deceit. Laban had been unfair to him for years and was constantly changing his wages. This was the type of man that Laban was. Now let's turn to some verses that warn us to be watching for things in our lives where we can be deceived. Because God warns us there's a lot of things out there that can deceive us, and we need to be careful and on the lookout for those in our lives. So the first one we're going to turn to is in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 33. So 1 Corinthians 15. So 1 Corinthians 15, verse 33, and it says, Be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners. So what is this verse telling us not to be deceived about? Well, that word communications means company or association. So if we keep bad company, if we have bad friends and listen to bad things and watch bad shows, those things will affect our character. And this verse is telling us, don't think we can get away with it or that it won't affect us. It will affect our good morals if we're influenced by evil things. It's a warning for us that we need to take very, very seriously. The next one is in James chapter 1. So James comes right after Hebrews. So James chapter 1, and we're going to read verses 22 to 25. It says, But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word, and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. For he beholdeth himself, and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. So these verses are warning us that if we only listen to God's word without trying to implement those lessons in our lives, it will not have the proper effect on us. It's no use to just listen and read about God's words and what he expects from us, but we need to live our lives the way we're instructed. And these verses are telling us, don't be deceived. We will forget about those things if we don't live according as God would have us to. The last verse we're going to look at is in Jeremiah chapter 9. So Jeremiah chapter 9. And we're going to read this together in Jeremiah 9 verse 4 to 9. And this is God speaking about the nation of Israel. But the warning applies to each of us today. Because we're going to read how God feels about deceptive people. Okay? Verses starting at verse 4, Jeremiah 9. Take ye heed every one his neighbor, and trust ye not in any brother, for every brother will utterly supplant, and every neighbor will walk with slanderers. And they will deceive every one his neighbor, and will not speak the truth. They have taught their tongue to speak lies, and weary themselves to commit iniquity. Thine habitation is in the midst of deceit. Through deceit they refuse to know me, saith the Lord. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, Behold, I will melt them, and try them. For how shall I do for the daughter of my people? Their tongue is as an arrow shot out. It speaketh deceit. One speaketh peaceably to his neighbor with his mouth, but in his heart he layeth his wait. Shall I not visit them for these things, saith the Lord? Shall not my soul be avenged on such a nation as this? This is God telling us that he will punish those that live this way. That is how strongly God feels about deceit, and how he will not tolerate that. We cannot be a part of God's family if we practice deceit. God will not allow us to dwell in his kingdom. That's how serious God takes deceiving other people. And unfortunately, this man Laban was a man of deceit. He was a man who couldn't live the way God wanted. He was a man who loved his things, and he couldn't keep his promises, and he deceived others for his own personal gain. So hopefully the lessons we got out of this week in studying this man Laban will help to show us how we should be living our lives opposite to how Laban lived his. So what are 4 lessons that we can take away from this week? Number 1, we need to not care for the things of this world, our possessions and the stuff we have. Number 2, we need to keep our word to other people. When we say something, we need to follow through with it. The third thing is we need to always go to God in prayer. It's never a bad time to pray to God, especially when we make decisions in our lives. And the last thing is we need to be practicing godliness in our lives so that we're not deceived by this world. So let's end by reading Philippians 4, verse 8 to 9, and I'll read that for you. Because these verses are a great contrast to the life of Laban and how we're supposed to live our lives. It says, Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. So that brings to conclusion the devotions this week, and I thank you for allowing me to bring these lessons from the life of Laban to you from a whole 4,117 kilometers away in Victoria. And next month, you'll be getting devotions from another brother out here in Victoria, and he will be dealing with Rachel and Leah, the daughters of Laban. So you have that to look forward to. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day at school.